The Middle East is on a knife's edge, and what is unfolding right now could reshape the entire regional order within days, if not hours. The speed of developments on the ground, in diplomatic backchannels, and inside American courtrooms is outpacing almost every mainstream narrative being offered. Subscribe to Frontline Pulse, hit that like button, and drop a comment below, because the next few minutes will give you the complete, unfiltered picture that most coverage is either missing or deliberately simplifying. Iran has released footage claiming it launched missiles directly at U.S. military forces operating in the region. Kuwait confirmed it was actively intercepting incoming fire over its own territory. And all of this is erupting at the exact moment U.S. Central Command acknowledged that the Pentagon had already carried out self-defense strikes over the weekend, striking Iranian radar installations and command and control infrastructure in a series of operations described as defensive in nature, but unmistakably offensive in their strategic logic. Two nuclear-adjacent timelines are now colliding in real time. The space between active diplomacy and open military confrontation has never felt thinner, and the margin for miscalculation has never carried higher stakes. At the center of all this churning tension sits a negotiation that keeps rewriting its own terms. President Trump, speaking in a sit-down interview conducted by his daughter-in-law, Laura Trump, described the ongoing talks with Iran as slow, deliberate, unfolding entirely on his own timeline, saying he is in no hurry, that the Iranians are exceptionally tough negotiators, and that progress, however incremental, is being made in the right direction. Sources with direct knowledge of the process have confirmed that Trump transmitted a revised framework to the Iranian side for their consideration. Yet just 7 days before that confirmation emerged, the same president was publicly characterizing the deal as already largely negotiated, essentially done in its broad strokes. The contradiction between those two positions is not subtle, it is not accidental, and it is not going unnoticed inside Tehran, where every American signal is being parsed for advantage and weakness simultaneously. The terms Trump has placed on the table are stark, maximalist, and presented as non-negotiable. Iran must commit permanently and verifiably to never obtaining a nuclear weapon. Not a temporary freeze, not a managed enrichment ceiling, but a full and binding prohibition. It must surrender the entirety of its remaining stockpiles of enriched uranium, removing any material that could serve as the foundation for a weapons program on any accelerated timeline. And it must reopen the Strait of Hormuz, the narrow choke point through which an enormous share of the world's daily oil supply moves, and whose closure has sent shockwaves through global energy markets with immediate consequences for prices at every gas pump across America. These are the conditions as Trump has framed them publicly. While the president spent significant portions of the weekend on the golf course, projecting an image of deliberate calm, he did convene a 2-hour session with his senior national security leadership inside the Situation Room on Friday. A meeting focused specifically on the mechanics of extending the existing ceasefire and constructing a viable framework for gradually reopening that critical maritime corridor. The combination of public nonchalance and private intensity is a deliberate posture, but it leaves observers with genuine uncertainty about how close or how far a real agreement actually is. Iran's response, filtered carefully through state media and official statements, sits somewhere between cautious consideration and open skepticism. Senior Iranian officials are described as actively reviewing the American proposals that have been transmitted to them. That alone represents a level of engagement that some analysts have characterized as more substantive than previous rounds. But the country's chief negotiator delivered a message that cuts through any diplomatic softening with unambiguous bluntness, warning his own negotiating team and the Iranian public not to trust the words or the promises of the enemy. Read that statement carefully. That is not the phrasing of a party edging toward a historic compromise. That is the language of a leadership structure managing domestic political pressures while keeping its strategic options deliberately open. It is the language of delay dressed in the vocabulary of principle. And it matters enormously for understanding how much runway this diplomatic process actually has before it either produces results or collapses into something far more dangerous. The complications surrounding the negotiation extend well beyond the bilateral dynamic between Washington and Tehran. Iran has made explicit that any agreement it considers must address all active fronts of conflict simultaneously, and that includes Israel's massive, expanding, and increasingly consequential ground operation inside Lebanon. Israeli forces have now pushed deeper into Lebanese territory than at any point in the past 26 years, prosecuting a campaign against Iranian-backed Hezbollah that is fundamentally altering the military balance in the country's south. Among the most symbolically charged and strategically significant developments of recent days, Israeli troops have captured Beaufort Castle, an ancient fortress positioned on a commanding mountaintop that has historically served as a critical observation and control point over the surrounding terrain. The Israeli flag now flies above its walls. The image carries enormous symbolic weight on every side of this conflict, and it is not an image that Iranian leadership can absorb without domestic political consequence. The human cost accumulating inside Lebanon during this period is severe and accelerating. The country's health ministry has reported that more than 3,400 people have been killed since operations escalated in March, with over 10,000 additional casualties requiring medical attention. Entire communities in the south of the country have been devastated. Infrastructure that took decades to build has been reduced to rubble in days, and the Lebanese state, already fragile, already economically broken, already hollowed out by years of political dysfunction and financial collapse, is now absorbing a military campaign of an intensity it has not experienced in a generation. Iran's insistence that any deal address this front is not simply a diplomatic gambit. It reflects a genuine calculation that accepting American terms while Israeli operations continue at this scale would be politically untenable for any Iranian leadership that wishes to maintain its domestic legitimacy and its regional credibility among the network of proxy forces it has spent decades cultivating and funding. Back inside the United States, the pressure is compounding from multiple directions and at multiple speeds simultaneously. Gas prices remain stubbornly elevated, delivering a concrete and daily reminder to American households that geopolitical instability in distant waterways translates directly into economic pain at the most local level imaginable. The gas station, the grocery store, the monthly budget of every working family trying to make numbers add up that no longer do. The administration's position is that patience is the correct strategic posture. Trump responded to his critics and to a restless public late overnight through a social media post, telling those expressing concern to sit back, relax, and trust that everything will work out in the end. It was the message of a president projecting absolute confidence in his own instincts and his own process. Whether that confidence reflects genuine progress behind closed doors, or whether it is a form of strategic ambiguity designed to keep all parties, domestic and foreign, off balance and uncertain, remains the central unanswered question hanging over every aspect of this situation. And as if the accumulating foreign policy pressure were not already sufficient, the weekend produced two significant and separate legal defeats on the domestic political front, both arriving within a compressed 24-hour window that few administrations have experienced simultaneously. The first involved the administration's so-called anti-weaponization fund, a $1.8 billion mechanism that critics argued could ultimately direct financial payouts to individuals who were convicted of violent acts during the January 6th Capitol attack, including those found guilty of assaulting law enforcement officers performing their duty that day. A federal judge ruled unambiguously that not a single dollar of that fund could be distributed to anyone pending further legal deliberation over the fundamental question of whether the fund's structure and purpose are legally permissible in the first place. The ruling is a direct and serious challenge to one of the administration's most politically charged domestic initiatives, and it arrives at a moment when the White House can least afford additional legal vulnerability. Then, within hours of that first ruling landing, a second judge in an entirely separate jurisdiction delivered another blow. This court ruled that neither the president personally nor the board he had handpicked and installed had the legal authority to rename the Kennedy Center, one of Washington's most prominent cultural institutions and a venue that carries significant symbolic weight in the American public life. The judge was explicit and direct in the reasoning. Congress gave the Kennedy Center its name through legislative action, and only Congress holds the constitutional authority to remove or replace that name. The Trump administration was given 14 days to comply, meaning the president's name must come down from the building within that window, or the administration faces the prospect of open defiance of a federal court order. Two major legal defeats, two different courts, two different jurisdictions, one 24-hour period. The cumulative political and legal weight of those two decisions, arriving simultaneously while the administration is simultaneously managing a near confrontation with Iran, an expanding Israeli ground war in Lebanon, elevated domestic energy prices, and a fragile and contradictory diplomatic process, paints a portrait of an administration operating under pressure on every front at once. This is the full and unsparing picture. A region teetering on the boundary between a managed ceasefire and an escalation that nobody fully controls. A nuclear negotiation producing contradictory signals from both sides of the table. An American president projecting public calm and private determination, while his legal position at home is being challenged in federal courts simultaneously. Global energy markets watching the Strait of Hormuz with the kind of attention that only existential economic stakes can generate, and a world holding its breath to see whether the diplomatic architecture being constructed in back channels can hold long enough to become something real, or whether the pressures accumulating on every side collapse it before it ever reaches the finish line. These are not separate stories. They are one story, And understanding how they connect is the only way to understand what is actually at stake in the decisions being made right now. Follow Frontline Pulse on every platform you use. Share this video with everyone in your life who is trying to make sense of a world moving faster than the headlines can track. Hit the like button to push this analysis to the people who need it most. And subscribe now. Because when the situation is this complex and this consequential, you need a source that goes deeper every single time without losing the thread that ties it all together.